The fact that only 3 countries condemned it and many more countries condemned Iran for the response shows you the pathetic state of affairs of this world. The shameful Arab Gulf monarchies condemning Iran, the double standard hypocritical genocide supporting Western establishments condemning Iran, anyone who dares to open his mouth against Iran. It's just a festival of hypocrisy. It's a festival of double standards. And you know why Iran is succeeding and will prevail? Because they have prepared for a battle on their own, and they knew the level of treachery of people around them, and they knew exactly how the international system works, and they know that the world is run by power, regardless of any UN and any international law and anything as such. Because all of these institutions are subject to Western influence. And in short, Iran is dealing with them with the language that they understand and the language that they have been inflicting on other people simply due to their military superiority and brutality. And that is respond to force with greater force.
All right. Good day, everyone. We are here with another show. We are here again with our friend Mahmood OD. We have been following your updates a lot lately on the war with Iran and, of course, all the updates in Palestine. So, Mahmoud, welcome on our little show again. And my question is immediately also, how are you doing psychologically following all this stuff?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very good, alhamdulillah, doing very well. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm doing so, I must say. I find it all very difficult to digest. I'm always amazed how you're live streaming pretty much every day, and all the updates on the war with Iran, what's happening in Palestine. I'm like, how is he doing that psychologically? It's so amazing. You still look healthy and fit. How can you say that? You just look psychologically very sharp. So I'm always wondering, like, how are you doing? Do you have some kind of special?
You need to take care of yourself on multiple levels. You need to take care of yourself religiously, physically, spiritually, and also have a level of understanding on what you talk about, of course, and understand that the events that you talk about as well, they are not always attached to what you go through as an individual. So you need to separate between yourself and what you talk about. That's not to say, of course, as in detached emotionally from the people or whatever, or the suffering. But that's one thing that you have to do as someone who talks about these things, so that you're able to view them in an accurate manner and also reveal the true picture to people. Because one of the main things that push me for my work and what I do is, of course, the level of misinformation that is being published and the justification on mainstream media and from the sides who are conducting these acts of aggression, and the fact that they're relentless, they never end. Therefore, from our side, we have to be continuously posting the truth, or what we perceive as the truth at the end of the day, and show it to people exactly as it is. And like with the Palestinian case, with the Iranian case, we're seeing the same thing. People are, well, mainstream media, corporate media, the Zionist lobby, of course, and the American administration constantly providing misinformation about the war, their reasons, Iran, the Iranian people, and that's getting them into so many contradictions. Because at the end of the day, how do they conduct their actions? They try and justify them to the people, of course. And then they go on and tell you that we are going to liberate the Iranian people, or, We want to instill democracy. We're worried about the human rights. And they'll start by bombing a school, right, with 150 schoolgirls. So I think that's very important. And it's proving to be effective because more and more people are understanding what they're doing. More people, including in these countries like in the United States, are disagreeing with the war. Like, for example, now we take Iran, sabotage on the aircraft carriers, fires, and toilets. Then we have high levels of people asking for exemptions in the American army. They don't want to participate. And the public opinion. I mean, the American president went on to this war without public approval, without a mandate, without going through Congress. He goes against international law. And all of these things are very important to highlight. But what happens on a day to day basis is also very important because that shapes the opinion and creates the psychological warfare impact on the people, right? So before they win on the ground or hope to win on the ground, they would want to win by making the other side believe that they lost. That's what they do. So none of the accomplishments of the Iranian side, none of their failures, nothing in terms of the military losses, for example, the asset losses, the financial, none of that. They don't talk about any of that. Hence why it's so important to observe things as they go along. Likewise with the Palestinian case. Like, for example, when Israel was in the middle of a full throttle genocide in Gaza, and the Palestinian resistance was still fighting. Isn't that something, for example, worth mentioning alongside everything else that's happening, the genocide and the suffering of the people and all of that? Because that gives the people the real perspective of what's happening. And that's one of course, of the motives behind my personal work and the fact that I try and reveal all aspects of the war as it goes ahead.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. And I totally agree. We are living in a completely propagandized environment, especially when you live in the West. I'm lucky. I live in China, so for me, that's very different. And that's also what I wanted to ask you about that public opinion. You just said that public opinion is very important, and you see that a lot of people, for example, in the United States, also in the military, are against this war. So that there seems to be a problem, you could say, propagandizing everybody in the West, which is a good thing. But I did see something just now, and I wanted to hear your opinion on this. I saw an interview with a very interesting professor. His name is Prabhat Patnaik. He's from India, a very, very interesting anti-imperialist scholar. And he said something about the Israeli society that still until now, about 80% of the Israeli society is still supporting the war against Iran and all their neighbors. And I was like thinking, if 80% of Israelis still support what is going on, I'm wondering what's going on here. Are these people not feeling any hits from Iran? Like, why is it that still so many people support this nonsense?
Well, the poll that I actually read was in the beginning, well, a couple of weeks back, and it asked the Jewish population of Israel, the non-Jewish population in Israel, and the Jewish population in Israel supported the war uh, with a percentage of 97%. So it's not even 80, 97%, and I'm talking about the Jewish Israelis. So if he's referring to 80%, that might be like with the non-Jews too. Now, there would be multiple questions, for example, about the accuracy of the polls, how many people were questions, what are the motives behind them, because one thing that we need to understand is it's in the interest of the Israeli authorities not to publish any sort of disagreement from within. However, regardless of that, there are very many indicators of the genocidal nature of the population of Israel. So even if there are people who oppose the genocide or oppose wars or oppose aggression, for example, and there are undeniably some people who do, the vast majority of the country supports the expansionist idea of Israel, the aggression, because it represents their true nature. How? At the end of the day, Israel was founded on the concepts of Zionism. Zionism as a concept doesn't have borders. It starts with Israel, it doesn't end with Israel. Ben Gurion previously said that the borders of Israel are where the last foot of their soldiers steps on. That means you're talking about an expansionist entity. Hence why when they started their apartheid colonialist project, supported of course fully by Western establishments, primarily the UK at the time, followed with full support of the United States, they began with a part of Palestine. That expanded to the West Bank and Gaza. Then it later went on to the Golan Heights and Sinai. They were expelled from Sinai following the 1973 war. Then they went on to Lebanon and occupied South Lebanon. Now they occupy more parts of Syria and they say we want to settle again in Lebanon. Netanyahu is saying that he understands the concept and has an affinity with it of Greater Israel. Christian Zionists in the American administration repeat the same thing. Mike Huckabee said he doesn't have a problem with Israel, in essence, controlling everything in the region. And so we have the ideology based on the military expansionism. That's number one. Two, the religious and racial superiority. Zionism is an ethno-religious supremacist ideology that believes in the supremacy of Jewish people over other people. And they view others as below them, hence why they are entitled to the land, to the expansion, to everything that they want at the expense of other people, because they don't view the others as anything. That's why they support it. Then we have the constant victimhood thing. So there's a general overall psychological problem in the country. Why? Because the population is brainwashed from the beginning. We were victims of the Holocaust. We came to this land because that was our promised land. We suffered so much, right, in Europe and what have you. And then we want to occupy other people's countries. Everyone wants to kill us for our identity, for who we are. And we need to constantly protect ourselves. And that needs to happen through this constant military violence that we have. So this victimhood, this brainwashing that happens with this society, the fact that they go through that from very early ages, talks about the Holocaust, talks about the past, talks about what they went through in Europe, as if it's related, to Palestine and the Palestinian people. I mean, Europe did that to you, not us. Then they go through the militarization. So in Israel, in schools, they'll have military personnel visiting the schools regularly, especially during the teenage years, but before that too, to mingle with the students, right? You'll have like a military helper, they'll call them. And the intention behind that is to show them that the army is there to protect you. Why? Because they want everyone to join the army, because it's a military state at the end of the day. And they want to use their own people as cannon fodder in this death machine. Let alone, of course, the hate preaching, the racist preaching, the constant aggression and violence, whether it's verbal or physical, against anything that is not Jewish in the country. All of these things create this toxic vibe in the country, a toxic country with toxic people who were never put in their place. That leads us to the entitlement. They are entitled and they are enabled primarily by their Western allies, who constantly try and find excuses for them by saying that they are victims of this constant aggression, that they somehow have a right to exist as an occupation and an apartheid, that they have the right to defend themselves although they are the aggressors, and that if you criticize them, then you are offensive to them and somehow anti-Semitic, although they have nothing to do with Semitism, and they are actually the ones who are being anti-Semites against the true Semites of the land. So it's a mixture of all of these things. And then you reach the part which is also included, in my opinion, in their enablement, the lack of decisive action taken, not only by their direct neighboring countries who have the biggest responsibility, but then what is called the international community, that's assuming that there is anything else left with what's called international community or international law, by the way, because there's an argument that the past 2.5 years have shattered international diplomacy, have shattered international law, and that was primarily due to Israel and the West letting Israel getting away with these murderous acts. They've had a couple of highs, so they became arrogant. Donald Trump had a couple of successes, for example, in Venezuela. Might have had other successes in other parts too, limited. He thought he can constantly replicate that. He goes to Arab countries, he gets trillions in investments. And he thought that, well, I can do that with Iran. Of course, adding to that the, in my opinion, blackmailing element that is included there with all of the Epstein files, and we all know who controls these files and who runs them, and the fact that Donald Trump is being blackmailed with that to go on this war of aggression against Iran. And now they're implementing all of those ideologies and to an extent some of their messianic beliefs too. However, in my opinion, that's secondary, by the way. There is an element of Satanism and messianism in what they do, but they first and foremost want Iran to kneel down. They want to control its resources. It's the third largest country with oil reserves in the world, with over 210 barrels of oil, just after Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. They are a country that have their own independence, their sovereignty. They refuse to bow down. They support the Palestinian cause. And we can see that aggression happening against them because of all of these things now. And Iran is proving to be very powerful, very strong, and very resilient in front of these attacks.
Yeah, exactly, and that's also what I wanted to jump in on the whole Iran thing, and also you mentioned the Gulf states, and I think that's a very important topic. Especially you're a Palestinian from Haifa, right? You come originally from Haifa, so you're somebody from the region, and I have noticed as an outsider, you know, I'm from the Netherlands. I'm half Algerian, half Dutch. So my name is Karim, of course, but I do not have a lot of knowledge about the whole culture and cultures in the region. And there's one thing I really noticed, and that is a kind of a split that was created by the Gulf states and, of course, U.S. empire between Shia and Sunni Muslims, and in particular some kind of very, very strong hatred towards Iran among a lot of Muslims from the region, and in particular the Gulf states. And I saw a very interesting show of yours a while back where you said we have to support Iran. Okay, Iran is fighting for us all, and Iran is fighting for humanity, which I really agree with, by the way. Can you tell me and our audience a bit more about this split and how well propaganda has worked to really cast Iran as a demon country, so to speak?
It's a multi-layered answer, and to understand it very well, we need to go back to the core, which is Islam as a religion. Islam as a religion has no sects. There are clear verses in the Quran. As a matter of fact, I made a post the other day about it, and the fact that the religion of Islam has no sects. إن الذين فرقوا دينهم وكانوا شيعا لست منهم في شيء. For example, those who have separated their religion and became sects, you have nothing to do with them. For example, that's a verse in the Quran. إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. Religion in the eyes of Allah or with Allah is Islam. Alongside very many other verses warning from separating into sects, and as a matter of fact, comparing it to polytheism. So that's number one. How did we start having sects? Firstly, we need to accept the fact that it's man-made. It's not a religious thing. Later, it started to get religious coatings because, well, that's usually what happens. Religion starts to get mixed with certain narrations, with culture. Thankfully, in Islam, we have the Quran, which we believe is the holy word of God that hasn't been corrupted. But other narrations have been corrupted, and then people started to use that as a way to prove each sect's righteousness, for example. And with the Shia and Islam and Sunni, for example, divide, it's political initially. Who controls the Muslim world? It's nothing to do with religion. We agree on everything else, almost, right? Later on, again, some narrations started to have more splits in certain things. But the main pillars of Islam, the main pillars of faith, Sunni, Shia, same thing. So we need to establish that. Now, throughout history, and because there's a political rivalry there have been wars, internal wars, based on who rules and who doesn't. However, restricting that to only Sunni and Shia is misleading. Why? Because, well, within Sunni you've had wars, within Shia you've had wars, and in between the two you've had multiple denominations. So that needs to be put straight. Similarly, of course, with other religions and other cultures and other denominations. Then we reach because if we can't go into history too much because it's a very long story, but that's briefly. Modern times. When did we start hearing about Sunni Shia? After the United States invaded Iraq. Before they invaded Iraq, they had a plan. The American administration had a plan. The 21st century is the century of war between Sunnis and Shias. Why? Because if you want to defeat your enemy, you make them fight each other. Iraq, for example, and that's not in active defense, for example, to Saddam or his establishment at the time, you hardly heard that. There were Shias, Sunnis, you didn't hear people married together and what have you. Everything was normal. The United States came. They've had agents working for them, by the way, and to this day, on both sides, the so-called Sunni and the so-called Shia side, agents working on behalf of the United States and other Western intelligence agencies to instill division and hatred. That's their whole purpose. And that would include swearing, you're an infidel, you're this, you're that, and you need to target them and what have you. How is that combined with the Gulf monarchies, or at least some of them? Well, to some of them, it serves their purpose because they're allied with the same powers who support this division. And they are implementing an agenda to serve their masters. So they want to instill that division. So we had that in Iraq, and there were years of sectarian wars. And by the way, in Iraq, for people who aren't familiar with this, you remember these explosions in the markets during the Iraq, where there were explosions in markets and populations and mosques. There were no disabled people left, as in some people with mental problems. These were the people who they used to go and do these bombings. And most of the campaigns were run by Western intelligence agencies. So there was the initial notion, of course, and then we have the current situation, who benefits from that, and then we move to the years of propaganda against Iran to cover up the shameful positions of monarchies who prefer inaction over any sort of action and want to portray Iran as an evil force simply because they have their own independence and they are outside the umbrella of influence of the United States. What do? They have to say that they are Shia, and they have to say that they are Persians, for example. Okay, but when there was a puppet regime installed there in the form of the Shah, who the United States and the United Kingdom installed there after the democratically elected Mossadegh wanted to nationalize Iran's oil, you had good relations with him, so long as he is the umbrella. And you don't hear anything about Shia or Sunni or Persians. You hear none of that. You hear that when you have a problem with them. And then they start going into historical debates and what have you, as if they have any relevance, and to also hide the fact that what Iran is doing now hasn't been done by any country in the world. All of these things need to be put together to understand why the situation is as it is. Then the contemporary situation of some of the Arab Gulf monarchies who have American bases that are targeting Iran, they are in a very shameful position. Their lands are used, in essence, as hubs of terror and aggression against an independent country and independent people. And to hide that fact, they would need to portray Iran as an aggressor. Today, just today, I saw a video being published by a guy from South Iraq in the Basra area, posting a video about missiles being launched from Kuwait towards Iran. Iran has proven, and we have seen evidence of attacks, of flights, of military base uses from Arab countries hitting Iran, although the Arabs promised Iran that they will not be allowing the United States to use its bases against them. What does that say? Either the United States views you with such contempt and they do not view you as anything and they do whatever they want and you don't have a say, or you allow them. One of the two. Both ways are unacceptable, and Iran isn't there to start calculating like what's your intention and what did you actually say or not. From their perspective, an attack has been launched from that area, therefore I'm attacking that area. And they have been very carefully calculated with their attacks, limiting them to the military bases and the individuals, the actual terrorists who were conducting these attacks, whether they're hiding in any location, because many of them left their bases. So now you're starting to hear that talk from some elements in the Arab world to, number one, undermine Iran's accomplishments. That's one very important thing, by the way. And that's why we constantly speak about what Iran does and bring the evidence to support it. Because there is a very strong attempt to undermine what Iran does. Like the small damage, the minor damage, and they are getting hit really badly, you know. They're hiding everything. Then to portray them as an aggressor. How did it start? The United States and Israel attacked Iran and they used your bases. They didn't tell you, they didn't consult you, they didn't ask for your permission. They simply used their bases in your countries to conduct acts of terror and war crimes inside of Iran, a sovereign country, with against international law. They don't have a mandate, they don't have anything to stand on. and in the middle yet again of diplomatic talks that were supposed to lead to a deal, by the way. Iran was exceptionally open with the talks. Of course, they had their limitations because they have their self-respect. But the American side does that. What do the Arab countries do, or at least some of them, because we don't want to include everyone? They go and blame Iran to a level now where some of them are trying to justify joining this alliance with Israel and the United States against Iran, and in effect fall into the trap that has been set up for them and open the space for more destruction in the region.
Yeah, I find it unbelievable that people still can take the side of the West and Israel. My question is to go in on that a little bit more. My question is, how do you see that now? Do you see a change among people and Muslims in general around you, for example, with regards to how they perceive Iran? Do you see a shift that people are becoming more supportive of Iran or not?
There is absolutely a shift, but to understand the shift, we need to understand which people are we talking about. So, first and foremost, you had some of the religious people in the Muslim world who were heavily influenced by some of the sectarian beliefs against Iran, who are starting to see the level of conflict and issues that they had. Then we have the people who were simply brainwashed by Arab mainstream media. And then you had people who had just political problems with Iran for their political project, or what they perceived as the political project in the region, which was again primarily shaped by the Arab mainstream media, whether their participation in Syria or their actions in Iraq or anything to do with that. And in many cases, of course, it's one-sided because it doesn't talk to you about the actions of the other side and what they do and all of that. And they don't necessarily reveal the full picture. But because actions speak louder than words, and because common sense is something very difficult to actually instill in many people's heads, by the way, they have to see things to know the actual truth and reality. So if you notice, when Iran attacked Israel, or responded to an attack, by the way, against Israel, because all of the Iranian moves are responses. Let's put that into perspective. Iran has constantly been facing aggression and illegal sanctions, illegal attacks, all of that. All of their attacks are responses to illegal aggressions against them. Now, if we go to 2024, the first Iranian response to Israel, and for the first time in history that Iran directly hit Israel, was April 2024, after Israel targeted multiple IRGC figures in Syria. They conducted the biggest wave of drone attacks in history. Many of them were intercepted, many of them landed. What did people say? And Iran said, that's our response. If you attack us again, we'll attack you. What did the people say? It's all a show. They gave them time, they gave them notice. They agreed on this attack between themselves. We don't believe Iran. Okay, fair enough. Iran had the previous Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh targeted when he was going to celebrate the presidency of the new Iranian president, attacked in Tehran. Iran responds in October. At the time, again, they said, oh, look at the Iranian response. It's only missiles and it's pathetic and it's this and it's that. And ignoring all of the impact, by the way. They were limiting themselves to the censored media, brainwashing mainstream media, weren't necessarily looking at the actual impact and the landings, and treating it as that. So that the previous two attacks were complete jokes. Okay, it was a circus, it was theater, and it was agreed upon between Iran and the United States and Israel. When did things start to change slightly more? Right, because we also have to include Hezbollah in the equation and what they've done. That also helped change the concept about Iran as a country. In the 12-day war, people started to change their opinion slightly because we had repeated attacks of Iran and we started to see real impact. So some people still persisted. It's all theater. It's all theatrics. Don't believe the hype. Iran is bad. Iran is bad. And they agreed the attacks. But some people started to change. Now, it's like the whole argument collapsed. Now, the other side wants a ceasefire. Iran is saying, we're not talking. We're attacking you, which puts anyone who suspected Iran in a much more difficult position. So all of these things are helping change the way Iran is being perceived in the Arab and Muslim world and globally too, because what we talk about here isn't just restricted to the Arab and Muslim world. It's a global matter. Why? Because the powers, as much as they want to portray this as either a religious war or a holy war or whatever it is, at the end of the day, they've done that with many different countries with many different religions. Venezuela is not a Muslim country. It's a Christian Catholic country. Other countries in Latin America, the same. Countries across the world, they didn't have the population of Iran. And in addition to that, we can't say, oh, it's only the Shia fighting, because Azerbaijan is mostly Shia and they are tied with Israel. And it's not only the Sunnis who don't, because many of the Sunnis do. Do you understand what I'm saying? So from a Muslim perspective, we need to understand that all of the sectarian and denomination talk needs to be eliminated because it has no real basis in the religion, and also it's being used by the enemies of Islam as a religion to cause division and problems. However, globally as well, and likewise, they use the same argument, whether it's with Christian Zionists, for example, or other sects, to justify their actions by either making them Zionist or having or putting Zionist ideologies in those sects or denominations, or making them, these sects, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslim, what's called partial or impartial. No, partial, sorry, as in impartial. Oh my goodness, I'm losing it. Basically not taking any side and being neutral, all right? Being neutral about everything. And we know where neutrality leads, especially in situations of great oppression and great destruction, great wars. They serve the oppressor. And in essence, by the way, that is the main thing that the Zionists are looking for. The Zionists don't want you to support them, by the way. If you support them, that's a plus for them. They don't want you to be against them. So that's why we have the tools of suppression. First and foremost, mainstream media and the psychological warfare and the thought police, in essence. So Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel is subject to constant attacks. Everyone wants to kill the people. If you criticize them, you're anti-Semitic. And you can't basically support anyone who resists Israel because you would be deemed as a terrorist. So they're putting all of these locks ready for you, right? Ready to handcuff you. Should you say that, for example, no, actually, they don't have a right to exist as an apartheid occupation without giving equality to everyone. Two, no, actually, under international law and human law and divine law, there's a right to resist. And no, they have nothing to do with Semitism because they are Khazarian Jews mostly who came from Europe and occupying this land, and they have nothing to do with Semitism. So these things, all of these things combined, by the way, shattered and cracked all of the chains that the Zionists and their tools, of course, tried to impose on people to stop them from criticizing Israel. Now, this leads them to the second stage, by the way, and that is the dangerous stage. As in, it's also dangerous, like with everything else, but it's a more advanced stage. What is it? It's a method that they have used before, combined with an additional method of hijacking and planting controlled opposition. So, first and foremost, we have deflection. The Zionist mouthpieces, what do they talk to you about? Islam is our enemy. The religions are, the Muslims are our enemy, especially in the United States. And by the way, somehow it's acceptable, you know, somehow it's acceptable. Although with them, we differentiate between the Jews or the Zionists, or, you know what I mean? Because you can't put everybody, but they say that. Then having people who are in line with Zionism, they don't have a problem with Israel as an apartheid Zionist state, being an ethno state, occupying, and having these people openly criticize Israel, only for them to later on to lead to taking a passive approach towards them. Because why do they need to do that, and why do they need to have so many things done now? It's because from an Israeli perspective, the public opinion, Western public opinion, but primarily American public opinion, matters very much for their existence, because they get the money from the United States, they get the funding, they get the arms from the United States. So public opinion in the United States is more important than public opinion in any other European country. They're of course working on it in other countries too, and they try and suppress, and they do all of these things. But in the United States, it's a different story. Because if you have a generation now that criticizes this war, and we already had a campaign, by the way, that was based on the war and the genocide in Gaza. Let's not forget, Donald Trump promised no wars. I'm going to stop the wars, right? Let's not forget that his supporters in his rallies used to say that, oh, Genocide Joe, they used to call Joe Biden. And that's why they voted for Trump. So we could already see the Israeli argument interfering in American elections. And it's only going to get fiercer, and it's only going to get worse for Israel. So what they want to do now is have a figure that is accepted by the anti-Israelis and anti-Zionists to bring to the White House in the future, so that they can maintain at least a level of support for Israel. But that's also a tough job, because should they fail, they're going to be facing the same consequences. But from an Israeli perspective, that would at least buy them some time.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. Well said. And as we are approaching the end of the show, Mahmoud, I have many more questions, but we can do we can do that another time. So my question is, and that's we stay a little bit in the same realm. I just saw an interview with Jeffrey Sachs, who we are going to see here tomorrow in Hong Kong. We're going to have a dialogue here at the university. And he said something very interesting. He said that of all the countries around the world, only China, Russia, and Somalia condemned the attacks on Iran. And that is very fascinating, because it also makes me think about how little pushback there is against Israel and the United States. The rest of the world, in my opinion, is very passive right now, or I could say already for about almost 3 years, passive in the wake of a genocide, passive in the wake of mass slaughter around the region. And I wonder, what is going on here, Mahmoud? Would you say it's the power of the Israeli lobby? Is everybody scared of Netanyahu? Is everybody scared of U.S. empire? I'm so baffled that there's so little pushback against the horrors that are being inflicted on Palestinians and people in the region in general. What do you think is the reason of this?
That's firstly a very important observation. from Jeffrey Sachs. Not only that, see, this is where it gets worse. So the reason that that happens, by the way, is because the attack isn't restricted to Israel, it's also the United States. And many countries, it's as if they don't want to upset the United States so that they don't go on Trump's bad books, because they know how irrational and erratic he is, and a megalomaniac who is going against everyone, including his allies. They didn't want to annoy him. They're viewing him as like this agitated big child bully type figure who they don't want to mess around with in the park or in the schoolyard, because he has all of the tools and he can hit them. So fear, and fear is low. Fear is something shameful. Fear is not honorable. So there is no justification for it. The fact that only 3 countries condemned it, and many more countries condemned Iran for the response, shows you the pathetic state of affairs of this world. The shameful Arab Gulf monarchies condemning Iran, the double standard hypocritical genocide supporting Western establishments condemning Iran, anyone who dares to open his mouth against Iran. It's just a festival of hypocrisy. It's a festival of double standards. And they do that for various reasons: to please the American and the Israeli, to hide their shameful, complicit position. So when they are complicit, they will condemn the oppressed, like they condemn the Palestinians. You condemn Iran. Then, not only to hide their complicity, many of them to hide their shameful inaction. So we're living in a circus of hypocrisy. So yesterday and a couple of days ago, I've been speaking about the fact that Iran is standing alone against the American empire as a country. You have other resistance fronts and the people support, but as a country, Iran is doing this on its own. And do you know why Iran is succeeding and will prevail? Because they have prepared for a battle on their own, and they knew the level of treachery of people around them, and they knew exactly how the international system works, and they know that the world is run by power, regardless of any UN and any international law and anything as such. Because all of these institutions are subject to Western influence, and they didn't keep that secret. When the ICC and the ICJ went against Israel and Netanyahu, they threatened Karim Khan and the ICJ, and they sanctioned them, the United States and other countries too. And Western countries weren't even showing the trial about a war criminal committing a live genocide, right? Iran knows that. And in short, Iran is dealing with them with the language that they understand, and the language that they have been inflicting on other people simply due to their military superiority and brutality. And that is respond to force with greater force. In many cases, Iran responded with greater force, not just with force. And now we can see concessions. We can see conflicting statements. We can see very deep contradictions coming from the American administration about this war of aggression against Iran and the objectives of it and what they have accomplished and what they haven't accomplished. All of that is due to the fact that they're shocked by the level and scale of the Iranian response that will not go anywhere up until they get their demands. And their demands are very fair and very basic. If you want peace, then peace for all. If you want a deal, everyone needs to be treated equally. What was is not what will be, and we have entered a new phase. And they're managing to impose that on the ground, and we can see that with the development of the war and the Iranian response.
Exactly. Very well said. Very well said. And I think with those hopeful words, we can end it here. and we keep following you, and hopefully we can speak with each other soon again. You can update us, and keep fighting the good fight, brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and greetings to all of your viewers as well.
Static crackles, voices rise. Truth breaks through their velvet lies. A screen of fire, a shield of steel. BettBeat media makes you feel. No borders, no change. No silence.